Krishna. He's the next session speaker. He's going to present about exception handling in Power Platform. He's a MEP and he's a top contributor in Power Platform. And he did very huge number of contributions you can able to find in the internet. Um, uh, Welcome, Krishna. Take a hand over to you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jenkin. Thank you for the introduction. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. Taking consideration that across the world, this is a worldwide event. Okay, before we go on to the session, I just wanted to take 2 minutes of your time to say that the new what is new in Power Platform or Power Platform world. So one thing is the recently Microsoft has recently announced enhancements in component. Their earlier components don't have event properties. Now they have added event properties like on change and on select events were not able to handle. We were not able to handle on change and on select events. Now they have added that behavior. Also, they added one more property called property parameters. So try to make use of that, and where we could find that is this is the link where you could see what is new with the components. This is one thing. And another thing is that Microsoft has restructured the mobile app view to render the apps in their mobile. This is really a great restructuring and redesign. They have completely revamped the way how it is today. So when you get a chance, just look at this also. These are the two new things. I hear echo. Could I request everybody to be on mute, please? Okay, thank you. So this is the second new advanced feature Microsoft has added to Power Apps or Power Platform area. Okay, those are the two new things. This is my habit. Like I always try to educate or like try to help my fellow Power Platform developers with the new things. Having said that, welcome back to the main session. A quick, these are all the sponsors for today's event. Big thanks for all the sponsors. Without this, this would have not have happened. And I don't see that. So quick introduction about me. I'm Krishna Vandanapu. I have 16 years of IT experience. I am a Power Apps Community Super User 3. What is that Super User 3 is there have been various levels, depends on our contributions. I've been contributing from last 1.5 year and contributed more than 280 solutions. I'm a proven Power Platform solution architect, and I have delivered more than 45 sessions on both Office 365 and Power Platform area. Apart from that, I am a Office 365 and local user group speaker. For some reason, that slide was not coming. Forgive me on that. So we all have our own priorities and we are busy with our daily learnings and work. So before we spend time on anywhere, the first question is what is exception handling and why should I know this? Anybody have any idea why should I know this? Yes, the basically everybody think that there is no exception handling mechanism in Power Platform. Okay, Paul, do you want to say something? Okay, everybody think that there is no way I can handle my exceptions or errors in Power Platform, but that is not right. We can handle exceptions effectively and in both which is both in Power Apps and Power Automate also. And why should I know that is no client is ready to see the exceptions or errors while they are using the app in production, or they are not ready to fail their Power Automate flows when when the flow is deployed into production. So we are here to learn how effectively I can handle exceptions to ensure that my app or flow is not getting failed when it is in production. I have divided this entire session into two modules. One is handling exceptions in Power App and handling exceptions in Power Automate. Let us learn how to handle exceptions in Power Apps. I have defined the business case for this is most of the times maker implement the app, but the user will end up looking errors at the runtime while they are using the app. In technical words, we call them as runtime exceptions. We all know that exceptions are two ways. One is runtime exception and other one is implementation time exceptions. Implementation time exceptions are always syntactical errors and typecasting related issues. But runtime exceptions are something that which is not handled properly. One of them is division errors, 1 divided by 0, which is infinity. So which is not gonna give any result. So all these are runtime exceptions. So in this session, we will see how to handle exceptions on two regularly used or most used uh, actions in Power Apps, which is submit form action and another one is patch action. What are these two functions? What are these two? These are the two ways we can submit data back to data source in Power Apps.
अरे शब्द मत बड़ा.
Uh, could I request Jaya to be on mute, please? Okay, I have created a Power App. What it exactly does is it submits the data back to a SharePoint list, which is a very basic app. It doesn't do anything addition than submitting data back to SharePoint list. If you notice here, I have created a SharePoint list. In SharePoint list, I have columns like project name as a mandatory and module name as single line of text. And that is also mandatory. Two mandatory fields. And when you come back to here, that has been added, that I have added onto my screen to submit the data with the help of submit form event. On my button click, what I'm doing is I'm submitting the form, which is a very regularly used or most used action in Power Apps. So let us see what happens if I don't handle exception and submit the data back to database or SharePoint list and version 1.1. And I'm going to say as the team lead as myself and the release date as and the team member as Sai and saying like sample release. Now, when I click on submit, which is a best case scenario, I said like release note submitted successfully. If you notice back to database, I could see my entry properly. But imagine if you see here the database structure, the fields defined at the list is project name and module name, both are mandatory. Let me say as sample project one and say like 1.1 and Krishna. When I click on submit, it gave me an error saying like an entry is required or has invalid. Please correct and try again. How I'm getting this error is I have handled the exception on form on failure error. Most of the times we just use submit with submit form, and there is a bunch of properties associated with the form. One of the important property is two of the important properties are on failure and on success. Mostly we don't worry about this because these are mostly not used or not known functionalities. We always think that, okay, always we should handle our exceptions only at the time of submit. But in case of farm, we have two defined properties is on success and on failure. On success is something which will get triggered only when the event get successfully executed. If it is not get executed, this event will not even get executed. The compiler won't even come up to here and it won't get executed. And on failure will be fired as soon as the event is failed. If you notice here, I don't have anything here, but I got the error stating that something is not correct. Just ensure it is in place. Why it is coming as that is called runtime exception. I have not handled anything. An entry is required or has invalid because if you see here, module name is not a optional field, which is a mandatory field, but I did not place that when I'm submitting the data. But if I want to give a proper exception, meaningful exception to the end user, how I have to do is I should handle that exception as part of my on failure event. If I had to handle that event on failure of my farm, what I have to do is come on to on failure. Here I should handle the exception. If you notice here, I have written the code. Let me and comment the code and see like what is the error. There is something called farm dot error kind. This will show you what is the kind of error I am getting when I'm submitting the data. Depending on that error kind, I can show you the meaningful exception or meaningful error message to the user so that it will be interactive to the user rather than giving a blunt message saying like, something went wrong, just go and look at it. So this is a way we have to handle exceptions. Let us see what is the error number it will show when I try to handle the exception with the same wrong submission. When I click on submit, if you notice here, error kind is 0, which means that all the mandatory fields which are not provided on the form, that error type is 0. So, and if I just say why the error type is 0 is, I also have to mention you one thing that if you see here release date, I have defined the release date as a unique field. It should be a unique value. When I say no for that and see this time it should show the error type as 11 because the mandatory errors are always 11. Always it is in the maker portal level. So I should always refresh the data source to get the latest schema onto my app. So how I can do that is come on to the data source, click on the ellipsis icon, refresh the data source. That will pick up the latest list schema structure. Now let me go back, and before I go there, I just wanted to ensure that all the data is not get submitted back to my data source. Okay, when I go here and say like sample one and version one, and I'll say Krishna again, and let me not when I just say submit, if you see that is interesting. It looks like it didn't pick up the latest one, but ideally when you see what happens is the error kind 11 is that shows the mandatory fields not existed. So using switch, since it is showing the different type of error with the error kind number, I am using switch to show various kind of error messages depending on the error exception. If you see here, I am handling error kind 11 as a mandatory field missing, and all for all the other errors I'm showing as submit failed. Please contact the app maker to validate the issue. When I try submit now, I will see my error message rather than the standard error message what we have seen from the Power Apps compiler. Submission failed. Please contact the app maker to validate the issue. This is how I can interactively show the error message to the user. So what happens is user will know what is the error message, what is the exact exception as part of this Power App when I'm submitting the data with the help of submit form action. So this is how I can handle exception. I repeat, we have to know two important properties. One is on failure and on success. On success will only get execute when the form get executed successfully. And another thing, we all think that it will just submit the data, but also it returns the return type as a record set. How I will be able to handle that is, if you notice here on success of my event, I am just handling that form 2 dot last submit. Using the property last submit, I can return my recently submitted data onto back onto the screen, and using that ID I can get what is the recently submitted ID. If I had to show that scenario sample project 3 and module 1, say 1.1, I'll say Krishna. When I submit that, that is how it should come, and related note ID. What happened? Did I provide the right ID? For some reason, demagogues are not with me today. Please be patient, my friends. Oh, okay. What the issue here is, I'm resetting the form, so the form data will be lost. See that? Since I was resetting the data, I was not able to get that. So when how I can use that is when I am trying to show immediately recently submitted data. Say like now, if I want to show the data, recently submitted data, I can say that if is blank is one other exception handling function in Power Apps. Is blank is to validate whether it is existed or not, the value is existed or not, which is as good as null handle exception in traditional development methodology. If you see here this time, when I submit the data with -1 and I submit, see that I can I just got returned my data immediately, and the data is very much accurate there, and this is my recently submitted data. So this is how I can handle my exceptions, and I can also get data back to the screen with the help of last submitted ID, stating that form.last_submit.id. And another mechanism to submit the data back to database is using patch. When do we use patch? When do we use submit is when we want to show the data differently on the screen apart from what I'm getting from the SharePoint list or data source. That is when we will use patch. What does that mean is, if you see here, all the data which I'm getting, I'm associating with my data source as a SharePoint list, and all the fields are part of that. Is imagine that apart from the existing data, if I want to submit one more drop down stating that active or not active, say as active, and I'll say the drop down data values as yes and no. And if I want to patch this data also back to the database, which is not part of SharePoint list, but I want to add that into a single line of text. Now, if you see here in my data list structure, I don't have the field as active or not active. When I just say that project active, but here I have defined the database as a single line of text. I want to show option to the user as drop down stating that active yes or no. That time what I have to what I can do is I can simply add one drop down on my screen and use patch to submit back to database. And patch syntax comes like this, and patch I'm saying like the data source defaults of this, and I'm handling this. If you notice here I am not submitting the data with the project name explicitly I'm not doing it because I know that project name is a mandatory field. When that could happen is, imagine that the database so the project got rolled out, but along the way client has come back and asked the developers to update the schema of the data source to optional to mandatory. So I know that the project name is not needed at the time of my development. So what I have not added as part of my patch statement. Imagine that uh, the client has come back and asked the developer or change the schema on their own by coming here and say like it is a mandatory field, but I cannot handle that exception because I have not added as part of my patch statement. If you see here, if you see this exception, I'll say module one, the business proper business scenario is once it is submitted in production, very much possible that client come back and ask us to change the behavior from mandatory to optional and optional to mandatory. Say yes, and when I click on submit, I don't see any exception here. That's the problem here when we don't handle exception at the time of patch. But client thinks that, okay, my data got submitted. But when I go back and see, that won't get submit back to the database, because that when I come out of here in the developer mode, I can see that hey, you are missing title is a required field, which is nothing but a project name is a required field. You are not submitting it, but not the end user will be able to see what is happening in that. How do I handle that exception is like as our farm submit event, even patch also return recently submitted record or recently patched record. Patch we used to submit, also we used to update the existing record. We all know that. And in this scenario, what I'm doing is I'm handling the exception in such a way that I have added a error label, and in the error label, I am doing one thing that if it is success and if my record ID is blank, I'm going to say as the submission failed. If not, I know that submission got success. Why? If it is, if it got updated successfully, the patch will return recently updated record. With that help, I can say that, okay, my record is not blank. So my submission got success. If the record is blank, I know that the submission got failed. Imagine that. Now, if I go back here and change the schema of this, stating that release notes as optional now, if I change the release notes as mandatory, not every time release note will be provided at the time of submitting the data in the real-time scenario. Now I intentionally change the release notes from optional to mandatory, which is very common scenario in the real-time. And when I go here, sample project is, and I'll say module 1 and 1.5, I'll say Krishna Now I'm not providing this, and when I click on submit, if you notice here, submission got successful because why it is saying submit got successful. What is the card ID? Cannot be. Okay, that's my bad. Which is not a blank again. Yes, is blank. Yes, it is. It should not be. How am I getting that? 2741. Oh, that's my bad. Did I refresh the data source? If I submit again, for some reason it is not working. Okay, if I just comment here, the title, the mandatory failed, and try to submit. This time it got failed because I am not submitting my mandatory field. For some reason, the database is not getting the data source is not getting updated properly. Though I change the data scheme and though I change the refresh, though I'm refreshing the data source on the app level. But if I just see with this, and when I come here, okay, I am updating the data source. Though when I'm updating the data, so what I'm doing is I'm updating with the text. If I had to handle this exception, what I had to do is I had to release this comment this release notes completely, because if I don't submit anything, it will come as a blank. I am updating the blank as a release note. So what the database is, the record is getting successfully submitted. If I just comment that release notes as part of my patch, and if I submit, it will not get submit. Okay, let me submit a success scenario by uncommenting this, and if I submit it, say like sample submit, it got submitted. Now if I just delete it and uncomment comment that release notes, imagine that I'm not storing it, and if I submit this scenario, it gets failed because I am not submitting my mandatory field, which is release notes. When I come onto the developer mode, and it clearly shows that release notes is a mandatory field, you are not submitting it. This is how I can handle exception in patch also. Again, I wanted to repeat one important aspect. Both patch and submit form returns the recently updated record as a return type. So please make use of that so that we know what is happening when we are submitting a submit form or a patch. This is the another scenario where we always get exceptions after we release the app into production. And the next scenario, and very common scenario, is now I'm submitting the release management and I want to send a email to the manager of the selected team lead. What I'm doing is in this scenario, I'm using the submit form. Once it is submitted, I'm trying to get the logged in provided team lead email and get his email manager name and send a email to manager. Let us see what happens in this scenario. I am saying like, sample email functionality. Module 1 1.5, and here I'm selecting Krishna and say that he as the team member sample. When I say submit, I don't have any exceptions, and it happily submitted submitted the email, and everything went well. And when I go to my emails, I can see the email from the should come in a while. Oh, that was Sai. And when I say portal.ho.com, and the manager for Krishna is Sai, and Sai will get an email stating that the release management submitted successfully. When I see here for Krishna, my manager is David. David will get the email stating that the release management got submitted successfully. But if I submit any user where the manager, if I submit any team lead where the manager is not associated, if you see Sai, I don't have any manager associated with them. So when I submit a release note with now I'm selecting Sai as my team lead wherein his manager is not updated in the backend. Submit that. It did not show any exception, but when I come here, even here also I don't see any exception. But the reason behind that is I'm not handling the exception properly. It won't send the email also. The user won't get the email and there is no clue what is happening around here until and unless I come here and see what is this handle exception. And how I can handle that exception is if I see here, the better way of handling that exception is always use is error function. And I say here, if I handle this exception as if is errors or Office 365 email, in this I have I'm first validating is my error exception error is my manager associated for the selected team lead. If the team lead has the manager for that selected, then only you send the email. If not, you give a message stating that manager name not found for the selected team lead. So another function to handle exceptions in Power App is error. Let us say sample email and the module name is module M1 and say like 1.5. And in this scenario, these scenarios, what happens is the data will get submit, but only the issue is the email won't get triggered. Submit here. What is happening? Let me close the app and open the app again one more time. Looks like it is not working the way how it should be. It is most of the times caching issue. Okay, one moment. So these are the various exceptions. Any questions as of now? Now, let me try this time. Hopefully this time demo works. For some reason it is not showing the error, but that is how we can handle using is error exception. We can handle the exception, or if there are any exceptions, I can handle that. If you notice here, it is just showing that there is no email ID for the selected user. For some reason, it is not firing the event. Sorry about that. This is how I can handle exceptions in Power App. And the next way, next exception handling mechanism is in Power Automate. The business scenario for and the business scenario and the reason why I need to implement exception handling in Power Automate is no user want to fail their flow if there is only one step got an error in their flow, entire flow. If the basic issue with the Microsoft Power Automate is in the flow, if one step got failed, entire flow will get failed if you don't handle exceptions properly. And another issue is if your flow get fail continuously 8 days in a row, the Power Automate will turn off the flow uh, to ensure that the system is healthy and working properly. So I request you to implement the exception handling, because if you don't implement the exception handling, flow engine will automatically turn off the flow and there is no way how user will handle these exceptions. And if you see, the traditional way of exception handling is try catch. In this try block we will handle the exception, and in the, we will add all the code where we are anticipating the exception. As part of the catch block we will catch the exception and we will show the relevant exception to the user, and the finally block is to execute if there are any if there are no exceptions or on the finally scenario. And how I can replicate or how I can implement this scenario in Power Automate is, in Power Automate we have a property called configure run after. How I will know that is, select any step which you are anticipating possible exception. I'm anticipating the possible exception at the time of sending email. So what I wanted to do is I want to handle the exception of send email. What I have to do is, you cannot handle the exception on the same step. Always in Power Automate, I can handle the exception step followed by that. I repeat, I can handle exception only the step followed by that. I cannot handle the exception on the same step or two steps after to that. So the next step, what I'm trying to do is click on the ellipsis icon, select configure run after. When I click on that, the Power Automate will show an option for me to say that whether I want to run this step, which is flow status step, if the send email step is success or failed or skipped or timed out. Now I want to execute this step only if I want to run if I want to run this flow status step action only if that is success. By default, all the actions in Power Automate will come with this behavior that is successful of previous step. If I want to skip this step, if this step is getting failed, I can always say that has timed out or has failed or has skipped action. Okay, let us see how we can implement that in a real-time scenario. I'm going to create a flow. The business scenario I'm going to create here is send an email to my selected lead. Send email to manager. Here, I'm going to create a text property stating that lead email. And the next step is uh, get manager. So I'm going to get the manager for the provided email. Now I want to send the email to my manager. State that I'll select email saying that release notes created. And here I'm going to say that hi, I'll say display name of the manager, and I'll say release note created, please approve, and I'll say regards admin. This is very straightforward. And when I try to run this flow with two scenarios, scenario one is my email, wherein I have my manager selected properly, manager associated properly, and I just say continue. I'll say this and run the flow. The flow got executed successfully because when I expand this, my manager is David, and this the flow David Wilson, and I got the email of the David Wilson and it sent the email successfully. But if I run the same flow for a failed scenario wherein I don't have a manager associated for a user, which is Mr. Sai, for some reason it didn't work for the Power App mode. I'm just taking Sai's email here, and when I submit, when I run the flow, if you see that the flow got failed, and all the whatever the actions I have followed by that, it won't get executed because it this step it got failed, and it is getting clear. It is showing the message error message clearly that resource manager does not exist one of its required field. So how I can handle that exception is, as we said, if this step got execute, I wanted to run this step. So click on this, click on run after. If it is success, that is when I'm sending this. If it is failure, what I wanted to do is I want to send another email to the set of admin team stating that, hey, for the selected user, there is no manager associated. So the flow is getting failed. How I can do that is click on here, add the parallel branch, and here I'm sending. I wanted to send email to my lead stating that. Imagine for now I'm sending it to myself. I say Krishna, say that email manager mapping missing. Manager is a manager is not mapped for the lead email. So this one I want to get execute. When I want to get execute is if this is failed or skipped. If I just run this now, if I wanted to test the same scenario now, the flow is failed. But if you notice here, it clearly handled the exception stating that the manager is not mapped. And in fact, it's triggered an email to me stating that manager mapping missing for that entry. If I wanted to, if I don't want the flow to show like this, is what is the other thing I need to do is I need to add a terminate function when I am handling exceptions using this run after methodology. The though the actions are completed successfully, it won't get update by default as the flow status. The flow status need to be updated explicitly with the terminate function. If I update the flow status as a success with the help of terminate action, see what happens. The same scenario for the same scenario. Again, I'm using Sai, but this time the flow status will show as success. Flow ran successfully. And when I go here, and if I see the flow history, this one is showing the flow history as success, and but these two are showing as failed because I did not handle that exception properly. And even this time also I got the error exception email to the user. This is fine, Krishna. I can handle one step happily. How about if I have more than one step before before I send the email? Let me delete this for a minute. This also I don't want. What I'm doing now is before I send the email, I am doing some operations. Stay that compose stating that project name is yet to decide. Something I'm just saying. OK, but if now I want to send the email only when I get the email manager is getting resolved properly. But when I click on ellipsis icon, say run after, it is only able to handle the exception on the compose. It cannot handle the exception at the uh, manager fetching action. How I can do that time is what I can do that time is this is when we can use the best methodology as scope. Implement a scope. I'll say this one as try block. In this here, I'm just moving all my actions to the try block. If you notice here, this is a try scope. In the scope, I can handle more than one action. In this, I can now say that this entire block I wanted to run only when this manager is success. You can ask me, but I want to run only this action, Krishna. I don't want to worry about this. If this is not gonna work, there is no way I want to proceed further. So I'll say run after, identify all the possible exceptions I can, possible steps I can encapsulate into this. Now I'll say one more action as control. Now I'll say catch. Here I wanted to do a compose stating that a result of my try block. Uh, when I wanted to say what I wanted to do is now this time I want to handle the exception in the error. How I can do that is result of try, because result of try, which is nothing but my, this is nothing but my scope. When I say that, it will show what is the exception here. I'm handling that, and I can add one more. This one I can say run after when the try is skipped or failed. When this is having an exception, try will automatically get failed or skipped. So I wanted to run this only if the try got skipped. If it is not skipped, then I don't want to worry. Now I wanted to add one more scope to continue my rest of the flow, which is nothing but finally. This one I wanted to run irrespective of whether my scope is, my catch is skipped or executed or anything. When my catch will block will get skipped is if this is successfully executed, catch will get skipped. But even after that, I wanted to run my rest of the flow. So I wanted to say that I don't care whether this is success or this is failed or this is skipped. I wanted to run this step irrespective of my execution of catch. I'll say one more compose. I'll say compose, say that this is finally block. And now I'll say last step as terminate the flow with the status as success, because I know I'm handling all my exceptions effectively in my flow. Now, if I run this scenario against the same fault team like user where I don't have the manager associated here, this time I'm executing my flow with more than one statement as a block, which is nothing but a scope. The flow got executed successfully. If you notice here, this got skipped and this got executed. And when I come here, it clearly showing what is the error. And if you notice here, the error is coming in a JSON format, and it clearly shows the error as the whatever the exception it is. And finally got executed because I'm executing the other set of block irrespective of my catch is skipped or handled, skipped or executed. Now, if I don't want to show the entire message in a JSON format, and if I want to show only that particular error, how I can do that is I can write a simple formula using that formula. Using this formula, I have written the formula, made it ready. I'm writing one more compose statement stating this time I'll say error message or message from try block. And here I'm writing the exception here as this. This is the formula using this try. I know this that is coming as a JSON format. JSON is nothing but a set of records. So out of that, I'm getting this like this. When I say update this, when I run this time in compose 2, I'm pasting entire the error message now, but here I'm getting only the specific error message. Entire exception I'm showing as part of the compose 2, but here I'm showing the specific error message. If I run this time, I will see this compose with the proper error exception message. How that will help is if it is not a manager email related functionality, if I want to handle the math exceptions, I should know what is that exception. If I come here and see here, okay, it's like I made an error in my, yes, try, this should come. For some reason it was not coming. For some reason this formula is not working. I don't want to waste your time by spending on that. So this is how I can handle exceptions effectively even in Power Automate also. I hope you got the essence of the main aspect is basically the run using run after configure run after. I can handle exceptions properly, and I can show the I can store the exceptions as part of my run history, and that way I know whether my flow got failed or failed with what exception. I can see that when I go to the run history of the flow, I know which step got failed and what is that exception. I can clearly see, okay, this is the error exception. Hopefully this helped you guys. That is all about for today's session. And these are the learning material. I have handled and explained much more scenarios as part of my YouTube channel. These are the links for YouTube my channel, and I shall provide the same as part of the uh, chat window. If you have any questions, this is my contact information. You can reach me out on any of these channels. Twitter, LinkedIn is my immediate response area. I'll immediately respond on that. And this is my YouTube channel. I have around 25 videos wherein I have explained what are the ways of exception handling in a very detailed way. And also I have many other tutorials and recent updates in Power Apps. Thank you for your time. This is the survey, and you can provide your survey on this.
Hi Krishna, can you please share the links of all the tutorials that you have discussed right now?
Yeah, yeah, sure. I'll
Yeah,
send that. I'll send that in the uh, chat window,
chat.
madam.
That
Yeah,
would be great. Thank you.
sure, definitely. Thank you for your time, all of you.
Krishna, I have one question, a quick question.
Go
Uh,
ahead.
Regarding the timeout, like when it used to work.
Timeout when it used to work is when you have a action wherein I'm using a database activity and I'm not getting the connectivity for some reason, or when it get failed for more than 5 attempts, that is when the timeout will come into picture.
So timeout would be decided by other activity. If it's a database, so that activity would decide whether it's a timeout or
Yes,
not.
yes, yes, yes. It will wait for a long time. It will do some iterative successful tries, and it will get fail. Good question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Again, Rahul this side. I have again a question. Like in the real time scenario, I'm using some another RPA tool. So there, what happens? There used to be a lot of records. We used to pick one by one, and we used to work upon it. So let's say there are like thousands of records in the in our database. We are processing one by one, and in between. if something went wrong, maybe some business exception, like due to some data error, not due to some technical error. So in this case, it's going to be come on the finally. It's not going to go on the another records. So how we can implement it in maybe loop or something.
Uh, as of I know, when you are reading through the loop, it will go as a for each case by default, and it will automatically skip that entry, and it will go on to the next record. It won't fail the entire flow, but the entire end of the day, the flow status will show as failed, but it will process the next set of records. It will process the next set of records without any issue.
Okay, great, thank you.
Was it not happening in your scenario?
Uh, no, that is in some another RPA tool. So I was just relating with the Power Automate how this gonna happen. So,
RPA is completely different, sir. RPA is something very new, and still it is evolving in in its own era. Uh, I cannot compare this traditional Power Automate with the RPA.
okay, I understand. But now, like things are getting blended with RPA and this.
Exactly. The phases are coming, and hold on tight. These are all the exceptions, or these are all the user voices coming back to Power Automate development team, and they're working on that. Sorry for some of the demos did not go well. I don't know why it didn't go well, though they were working last night. I was ensuring that all those things, for some reason it didn't go well. Sorry for that, team. Any other questions for me?
Hey, if you don't mind, can you record those like the videos that you the demo which you were talking about and share it later on with like all of the attendees if that's okay or if that's possible.
Good point. In my videos, I have
Yeah.
ensured that all these examples, whatever I have explained, and much more scenarios have been covered in those videos.
Yeah, that would be really great. So we can like have an access to it later on.
Yeah,
And
that is on my channel, and you can see on your leisure.
okay, sure. So like the channel description and all stuff, like you've provided in the links, that is it.
Yes, and my channel is, when you go to YouTube, and you say Krishna.
Okay. Um,
This is me.
okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you all once again for your time, and have a nice rest of the event.
Thank you, Krishna, for your nice and good session and demo also. Thanks very much.
Thank you for
And
your
thank you,
call.
everyone. Yeah. Please fill the survey part.